G'day, I'm led to believe because of this strange, bizarre tattoo on my arm that my name is TJ. This is a fifth period and enjoy the podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Fifth Period, the film podcast hosted by two media teachers, where this week things are getting spooky as we tackle our belated pick for Halloween. Ooh. My name is Mr. Brown and with me as always is...
Mr. Whittle. He's trying to keep a straight face across the table from Mr. Brown because that ooh also came with hand effects. I was going to say
gestures, I guess.
Gestures would be the correct term for that.
It was spooky.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
On top of our breakdown of the Burbs today, we will also be doing a student appreciation and our regular weekly watches and Tantalising Trailers segments. So if you want to skip ahead to anything, I will leave time codes in the description below.
Skip ahead.
Our student appreciation today is for TJ, who I have only taught for a semester of media before, but have spent a lot of time outside of class with. He is often dropping by the office for visits. He is super duper friendly, and anytime we have a new staff member around, he makes sure he comes in and introduces himself.
Love it. TJ and I hit it off because we realized we're both into some more of the modern punk rock bands. So he and I always talk a bit of what's going on in terms of music releases as well. Love it. Love having TJ around.
Yeah, I adore TJ and have all the time in the world for him. Thankfully too, because it took us about 12 takes to get his recording for the intro right. And that was after you'd already done quite a few takes yourself, Mr. Whittle.
Yeah, it took me 3 or 4 and then I happened to delete them accidentally. So now we're on even keel of pressing delete on things accidentally.
Yeah, there were other students, some of the ex-year 12s were in the space with him when he recorded it. And a big cheer went up when he finally got it right.
Thanks, TJ. Really appreciate it, mate. Stay awesome.
Thanks, TJ. Let's jump straight into the Burbs. Now, this one is a big favorite of mine. I suggested it when we were coming into the Halloween season. I was really, really keen to do this. It can be a little tricky to pick a Halloween-themed film that also meets the PG requirements.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I was pretty impressed when you put this one forward because I think even last year with Film Club, we struggled. I think maybe we went with like Addams Family last year. But yeah, it's really hard to find a film that adequately meets those horror needs while still kind of staying family friendly. And yeah, you really hit it out of the park putting this one on the table.
Well, and you said yourself after I put it forward, if there were other student suggestions that came forward that were more suitable, obviously we would opt for that student selection. But I was very, very pleased that nothing else trumped this because, yeah, as I said, The Burbs is a big favorite of mine.
Well, what I like about the fact that I got to watch this one was, and no pun intended, but we got to dig it out of the depths. For me, it's one, and I was talking to my friend about it on the weekend when I was planning to watch it. He said the same thing as me. It's been at least 20 years since I've seen it. Like, I would not have seen it since the 90s, probably like mid-90s, I reckon. So I'd really forgotten about it to the point where I was procrastinating on pressing play on it because I'm like, I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it. There's a million other films that I want to watch. So yeah, but when I started, I'm like, oh, okay. Yes, it's a lot of fun.
I was very, very pleased to hear that. We kick things off with the Universal logo, which then becomes part of the film as it zooms into the
Earth.
Yeah,
and the music that's playing over it. Loved it, and yeah, had to look up who it was. Well, it came on the opening credits that it's a Jerry Goldsmith score. He's got about 100 titles to his name. Horror ones that you'd know would be Poltergeist.
Oh, yes.
Alien, or The Omen.
Okay, right. That's fantastic.
Songs,
also uncanny.
Yes. Bit of Latin Damien.
The eerie music at the start mixed with the fact that it was zooming in, it almost goes from a model into the real house. That transition, it had a very Beetlejuicy kind of quality to it.
Yes. What I love about all the films from this era is they're all still shot on film. And the look, you got the graininess. The copy I watched was remastered, so it still looked really nice, but like, films don't look like this anymore. And I'm sounding very old with that sentence, but it's true, right? Like, even a kid who is seeing all these films for the first time you look at a film from the 80s or the 70s versus the 2000s and onwards, they're so different to look at. And then, like, people try and replicate the film look or go back and actually still use film. But when everyone was using films, it created an era of cinema that just has a warmth to it, no matter what the genre is that you're watching. And when the first shots come up of this, I see that as well. All those location shots of the street and
Yeah. And it really does kind of set the tone of the film immediately by having us in the suburbs, in this street, at night, and then something sinister happening at the Klopex house.
Yeah.
So we're introduced to Tom Hanks' character, Ray, who comes out because the Klopex house is making a lot of noise, the basement's going crazy, it's glowing, and then all of a sudden all the noise disappears again. And we're also introduced, we don't quite know who the character is at this point, but we are given a silhouette of Bruce Dern's character. And I love that every time he is introduced in the film, he gets that military soundtrack behind him.
So
it's just the silhouette with his cigar glowing and then that in the background.
The cast is exceptional, but Bruce Dern steals the show. Like, he is
Mr. Rumsfeld.
so good. And, like, I couldn't list 10 films that I know him from. Like, I know quite a few. Most of them are, like, Tarantino films when Tarantino's picked him up in recent era. But, like, looking at his back catalogue, he's got a lot of titles to his name, but they're not big titles.
He did, I think it might have been one of the last, if not Hitchcock's last film, Family Plot.
I know he was an early name in Marnie as well. With Connery. That was, like, one of his first credits, but, like, it was just a bit piece. So he's certainly known, and I know him also as Laura Dern's father. But Bruce Dern himself is really on show in this film.
Yeah. And look, because everyone is so exaggerated and over the top, everyone really gets their moment to shine in the film. But I agree with you. He is a particular highlight.
Yep.
We get a really nice contrast to the new day afterwards. It really plays into the theme where the entire film you're going back and forth between, is something sinister going on or is this a completely innocent scenario? And there are so many times where they directly reference that through something else in the film. So going from this really haunting setting to, oh, look how nice this suburban street is just a really, really good way to start the film.
The contrast is very important in the film. One thing that you notice as well is the setting is always within the street. We never leave the street.
Is this a set?
Is
this on a back lot somewhere?
Is. So Universal had only 2 primary shooting locations for this. One was on a soundstage, one was on the back lot.
Okay, right.
Yeah, it was all LA. Yeah, all Hollywood. So I actually read the trivia where the house that Corey Feldman's character,
Ricky,
is staying at was actually the original house that the Munsters was filmed in front of.
Is that right?
Yeah,
That's cool.
From the 60s. So that lot has been used quite a bit.
Yeah, and lots of little fun horror references throughout this film as well. So that's a cool detail. I like that. The newspaper boy comes in and throws the paper straight into Ray's coffee. It's a very creative way to introduce you to the characters in this sequence because we get Ray coming out, then the newspaper boy throws it, and then we follow the newspaper boy to Walter's house, and then we follow Walter's dog to the neighbor's house, and then Ricky says hi to Mr. Rumsfeld. And so it's a really cool way. Everyone gets their own little introduction. We learn a lot of information. They give a really good justification for why all of the characters want to believe that something sinister is going on. I'll touch on that after everyone's introduced, but we meet Ricky, Corey Feldman's character. He's putting off painting his house, so he just likes to neighbor watch and all of that sort of stuff. But then he plays his boombox, and that's the entrance for Mr. Rumsfeld.
Yeah.
Full American patriot, army obsessed. He hangs up his American flag every morning. Doting wife Bonnie follows him out. Like, it's such a good introduction.
It really is. And, like, the dynamic that's set up between the entire neighborhood from this scene as well. Like you said, the cast gets introduced through it, but it's also the relationships are set up very quickly.
Ricky goes, I love that dude.
Yeah.
We also get introduced to the scenario that Ray's in, and the fact that he's taken a week off work, and it goes back inside his house as he's watching scenarios play out, and we are already getting this Rear Window, Disturbia, stir crazy kind of vibe. It's his first couple of days off and he's already neighbor watching.
Yeah. What I love is like he's walking back into the kitchen and we hear his wife's voice off in the distance, but it's a very mild thing that they do because it's not a big deal because it would have already been on the credits of the promo. But Carrie Fisher gets eventually released as revealed as the wife. Yeah, I just thought that was a neat little thing that was done. Yeah.
Yeah, and I adore her in this film. I mean, I adore Carrie Fisher in any film, right?
Yeah. Not in any film.
Oh, you don't want me to put Sharky's soundbite about how much he loves Star Wars?
Hey, it's Sharky again. I love Star Wars.
Yeah, you do.
There it is.
I also like that she plays a really grounded character compared to how crazy everyone else is. And already she can see him staying around the house is going to make him a little bit loopy. She's suggesting alternate plans. She's saying, we should go to the cabin. Like, you don't want to just sit around the house. Yeah. This isn't a good look for you. We need to get you busy.
Yep.
His justification is that his perfect holiday would be wanting to stay around the house, relax, drink some beers, and just kind of fix up a few things. And I see too much of myself in Tom Hanks' character
I
in
thought
this
the
film.
same thing. I'm thinking, wait, what am I doing over summer? Exactly that.
Yeah.
For 6 weeks.
But that's the other thing. Like, it's not that I see myself in relaxing and doing this stuff. I see myself in saying I want to do that and then getting a little stir crazy and feeling like I need to do more things.
Yep.
There were a few times where he's having his erratic screaming and moments of getting really hysterical. I'm like, ooh, I see too much of myself in that. So then we meet Art, who is hunting crows in the backyard. His wife is away and he's taking the opportunity to go off leash a little.
Yeah.
And this is what I mean when I say each of the characters, they give a very early justification for why they are acting the way that they are throughout the film. So they establish Tom Hanks' character as he's taking a week off work, so he's starting to go a little stir crazy. He's not used to sitting around the house, so he's looking for things that might be interesting within the town. Mm-hmm. Ricky's avoiding painting his house.
Shut up and paint your goddamn house.
Whoa!
So he's looking for a distraction from that as well. You've got Mr. Rumsfeld, who is like this. We don't know if he has a military background or he's just military obsessed.
It's never actually confirmed, is it?
No. But he's trying to replicate a scenario where he can take on that military role.
Yeah.
And Art, his wife has gone away for it, and finally he can kind of let himself loose off the chain and do something a little bit more interesting and out there. So I think it's a really cool way of, even though they have these bizarre reactions to things, as someone who lives in a street where if we hear some sort of noise outside, most of the neighbors will come out and investigate. It's not that far removed from a realistic scenario for people to be like, oh, what's going on, and gossiping and hypothesizing what might happen.
Further to your point, obviously we know as media teachers that narratively character motivation is so important to like justify why things are occurring, right? So if it's set up effectively, like you just pointed out, it's really going to make the movie roll.
Absolutely, yeah. So we find out that the Klopeks, who are Ray's next door neighbors, they have just moved in, and Art starts to get Tom Hanks a little bit suspicious about them as he raids their fridge.
Yeah, like, but it's like he first, like, what's Carrie Fisher's character's name?
Carol.
We first get Carol has served him up this beautiful big breakfast, but it's not enough for him. And then he comes back with like
he's got the pineapple.
And he comes back with his like lamb chops and just like gnawing on them. Like Art gets set up as very much the not bumbling, I guess, but like
he's pretty bumbling.
The goofy sidekick to Tom Hanks's main character. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
He influences Tom Hanks significantly throughout the film.
Yeah.
And you have moments where Tom Hanks kind of reels it back in. Even in this sequence, his son is mentioning about how he's seen them digging, and Art's like grave diggers, and Tom Hanks' character just goes, all right, that's enough of that, and just like cuts it off.
Little tidbit is that Tom Hanks was reluctant to play this role because it was the first time ever that Tom Hanks had taken on a role where he portrayed a father, and he didn't want to be shifted on in terms of like Hollywood possibility into, you know, not being able to play younger roles again.
Just in case Bachelor Party 2 came around.
Well, the next year, coincidentally, Big had come out.
Right.
So, which is very much the opposite of him playing a father.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We get to see our first glimpse of the Klopeks. Hans, the youngest of the Klopeks, comes out.
Hans Christian Andersen.
And I love this sequence. The music, while the camera does that 360 of the whole neighborhood behind Hans. It's
Yeah.
kind of like from his point of view.
Yes, like the choice to put the camera behind him and then have the lighting like silhouette him and like assert some kind of mystery and dominance over the neighbors and their fear was really well done.
Camera in general in this film is used so well, like
Yeah.
especially dynamic camera movement. Like you've got a lot of tracking in and zooming in on characters to really emphasize situations.
I think this is a good chance to mention that the work of Joe Dante, the director in general. So Dante came onto the scene with Gremlins. So
yes.
he was done a few things before that as well. He did the original Piranha as well. So he's got a few horror titles to his name, but Gremlins was his big breakout.
Yeah, and tonally very similar.
Yes.
That mix of horror, but also comedy underlying that. And yeah,
And I remember from Gremlins, likewise, with the camera being really effective with getting the audience to understand what emotion the Dante wants you to be feeling at the time. So he really does use the camera in a purposeful, active manner.
Yeah, there was very few still shots within the movie.
Yeah.
They dare each other to go to the house to ring the doorbell and introduce themselves. And as soon as they start walking towards the house, the music and the wind machine kicks in.
Yes.
I love how well music is used to show very stark contrasts in tone.
There's even like points in the music where the poodle dog comes out and the music starts like yelping. But like,
Yes.
I reckon Goldsmith got to put this score together in post and would have had a blast watching it, like just going, okay, this is what I'm going to do with this scene. Like, yeah, the music's very active in this. It's very dominant, but it's used well. I really like
well.
it. Yeah.
And in that sequence too, as they're walking towards the house, it does a zoom in of every single character watching them. I thought pacing was really, really well done in this film, not just for tension, but for comedy as well.
The
comedic timing.
Yep.
And then they even do a zoom in on Walter's dog.
Yep.
The reaction of Walter's dog as they're walking up to the house.
That's a
funny.
comment I had for later, but I'll say it now. Like the pacing was so strong, and you can tell when pacing is good when you maintain engagement for an entire film. That's a big sign that they've got the pacing right.
I'm curious to see when you were going to make that note, because I've got it later in my notes as well. So
It's the whole thing. Like I said to you, I was reluctant pressing play on this, and then I didn't take too many notes for this because I wanted to watch it. I didn't want to be looking down at a piece of paper because I felt immediately that this is a film that wants to just keep you going, and it does. It's really well done. Yeah.
And so they get up to the house, and he goes, they got bars on the windows. Oh, they got holes in the floor, too. As they knock on the door, 669, the 9 swivels around and becomes 666, which is the first direct reference to Satan and the satanic panic of the 80s.
So this film being released in 89, Satanic Panic was something that really started in the early 80s and then continued on for decades thereafter, but really at its heights into the mid and late 80s, where you had all the Reagan era conservatism that led into being worried about morality and stuff like that in American culture, especially around satanic music of any kind. You got to remember, like, heavy metal was becoming really prominent. So Satanic Panic as a overarching hysteria label has a lot that feeds into it. But yeah, certainly this film was influenced by the Satanic Panic, which had been around for 5 or so years at that point.
Yeah, but also satirizes it at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
The film goes back and forth, making you question the validity of whether something is going on.
Yes.
Because you go on the journey with them.
Yeah.
As they ring the doorbell, bees come out of the house, and we get a very slapsticky kind of sequence where they're running through the street, and even Mr. Rumsfeld tries to hose them down, but then gets pulled back on the hose.
For Bruce Dern, who looks, he's a bit elderly at this point in his life, he really leans into the physical comedy. There's a couple of scenes where, like, even that one where, like, I think it is him. I don't think it's a stunt double that does the kind of double back when he realizes, The hose is too short?
I think that's
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
I would be surprised if it's him later on that falls off the roof.
That one's a bit different.
But
yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
Like hysterical in the way that it's not just a fall. It's kind of like that really cartoony slipping and sliding.
Well, there's actually one that comes up a bit later that I think is him that I was very impressed with, but I'll save it for when we
Yeah,
talk
please.
about it. Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Every time they have something that's really intense, here's something that's going to be really scary and eerie, then they do this comedic moment that completely contrasts that and like takes away from it.
Yeah.
And so everyone's on edge, like what's going to happen when they go to the doorbell? And then you cut to this sequence where Ricky's laughing at them while this is all going down.
The balance that they get throughout the film is really strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we cut to nighttime then. We get the conversation between Carrie Fisher and Tom Hanks inside the house. She's talking about the bee stings and he's like, oh, but if we'd gone down to the cabin, I would have had thrice as many bee stings as this. He is always really defensive about everything that's going on.
Yeah.
He then steps out of the house and he goes to meet up with Art. And Art mentions to Ricky, oh, he sneaks out of the house so he can smoke cigars in private. And again, this really feeds into how gossipy their little town is and how they're just looking for something interesting to talk about and how any of these things can stem from just those kinds of conversations between people.
Yeah. What I like about Ricky's role is that he is observing and being voyeuristic of their voyeurism.
Yeah.
So, like, it's a meta-analysis almost, like he's taking the role of the audience watching them. Like, later on when he calls people over and stuff, we'll get to all that. But, yeah, I really like the purpose he has in the film in that sense. Yeah.
We hear at this point the story of the ice cream man Skip, who murdered his family. And as they start to bring it up, Tom Hanks is like, yeah, I remember that. Like, because it was something that he'd heard about when he was a kid. This is probably not a true story, but everyone always tells these urban legends when you're a kid, and then those kind of spread, and then everyone starts to think it is true. And it just feeds into this narrative of, well, maybe nothing's going on with the Klopex either.
That's why I was so in love with the film when it started becoming apparent that it's a commentary on people's voyeurism and nosiness and stuff like that, which we'll get to becomes a sticking point for how they end the film for me. But we'll wait for that.
Okay.
Yep.
And so at the end of this story, Tom Hanks goes, I'm going to go do something productive. Watch TV. And I also just like the little moments where it shows him spending time with Carol.
Yes.
They're watching Jeopardy and they get the question wrong and he's like, oh, they
They've
always
both got
do
notepads
that.
and they're working it out. Like this is back in the day where like TV used to be like this event for people. Like, yeah, I love that.
Art then again comes over to the house, sneaking around, but Tom Hanks says, I'm just going to go hang out with Art for a bit. And Ricky invites his girlfriend over and he's like, oh, we're not going to watch TV. We're going to sit here and we're going to watch this. There's a massive explosion that goes off at the Klopex house, followed by Hans once again coming out of the house with a very sinister looking garbage bag that he very aggressively shoves into the garbage can.
I love that they added the driving of the car from out of the garage just to the bin.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever to add further mystery to what Hans was doing. Yeah.
If he is carrying something in the bag that he doesn't want people to see, then it kind of makes sense that that's how he would do that.
For sure. They could have been a bit lazier with the storytelling and just had him carry it out. But no, they worked out that to have him drive 10 meters up the driveway, it's just creepy.
And it works again to the music because it gives you yet another sequence where someone's coming down that path of that driveway while it shows reactions of everyone else.
Yep.
They want to go snooping in the garbage cans, but it starts raining, so they decide to postpone it till tomorrow. And I love that the rationale behind that is that it'll be too suspicious for them to be snooping in the garbage cans at night. But in the light of day, going through someone else's garbage, that's completely normal.
Yeah.
That night, Ray even sees the three Klopex digging in the backyard.
Yes, yeah.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
I think they've even, is it called cranking the camera where they speed it up? Because they're digging like a little bit faster than they would be.
Right.
And it pairs with the music and it's really quite creepy.
Yeah.
I think they do a really good job by concealing the Klopex for so long. So we've been introduced to Hans at this point, but we've never seen the other two. And so they're just kind of like these hooded figures that gives it kind of like a goblin-y quality to them.
Yep.
The next morning, the garbage truck comes along and takes the trash, and even the garbage men play into the narrative of the film with skepticism. Like one of them's talking about, he goes to this group and they talk about a higher power and the other one doesn't believe in it. They never miss an opportunity to show this contrast between people who believe in something and people who are skeptics about it.
The two actors that play the garbage men,
One of them, Slippery Dick Miller.
they're actors that like I couldn't pinpoint where I knew them from, but I know that they're actors that have played bit parts in
Character actors,
stuff,
yeah.
and stuff for like decades, and they were so engaging the way that they like participated in what's going on in the street and the contrasting kind of personalities between the two of them. I really loved it.
Well, and also that the one that does believe in the higher power ends up helping them take the garbage out of the back of the truck.
He told me to help them.
This is when Carol's really trying to book the cabin because she can see Ray slowly losing his mind, and he gets super defensive about it, and he's like, you go to the cabin, I'm just going to sit here and I'll clean up and I'll order pizza. I love how much of a kid he is throughout the film. Like, he cracks a tantrum almost in every scene from this point onwards in the film.
He's really that kind of insolent kid, isn't he? Yeah.
Which is so great because one of my favorite parts of Toy Story is when Woody cracks at a Buzz that, you are a toy!
You weren't the real Buzz Lightyear, you're an action figure!
That's his character throughout this entire film.
There's a great scene coming up where the kid stuff is really leaned into.
After the whole garbage fiasco, they find out that there's nothing in the truck, but they notice that Queenie is wandering around, who's Walter's dog, but there's no sign of Walter. So they try and break into his house so that they can see what's going on.
Just an interesting little tidbit on Queenie. Exact same dog that played Precious in Silence of the Lambs a few years later. Yes, rubbing lotion on the skin. Yes.
Bruce Dern at this point goes, oh, there's signs of a struggle because the chair's pushed over. and Tom Hanks is like, I don't know if that's signs of a struggle.
It's things like that I just feel like they gave Bruce Dern the best role.
They give the other two lines where it's like they're dumb, but then Tom Hanks is somewhat playing the straight character where he has a sarcastic remark behind it. Immediately after that, you want to take that out of your pocket? You want to not steal that from Walter's house? It's just pocketing ashtrays and things. They find Walter's toupee and they hypothesize that something must have happened. The Klopeks must have taken Walter because no man would go anywhere without his toupee.
It's a valid point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't personally speak on that note.
Right, there's a George thing here right now, isn't there?
Oh, don't worry. I've got my Seinfeld reference lined up later on. But maybe we can get two in there. Who knows?
George, you decided to get a rug. Good for you, Jack.
Again, we get a fun moment where Tom Hanks goes from like indulging in it for a little bit, but then Corey Feldman breaks the plate.
That's great! All right, everybody,
nice.
I think we've broken enough laws for one day. Let's just get out of here.
What I love is that he epitomizes the hysteria of the moment, like the uncertainty and the wanting to be part of like the intrigue, but also realizing that he's being silly, battling the back and forth on that. I love what he's doing.
Well, and that's why he's the perfect choice for the protagonist, because he's effectively conveying what we do when we watch the film, when we go, is it something sinister or not? And so as much as he flip-flops, we do too as an audience.
Yeah.
And so we follow this with a sequence between Art talking about all the like Satanism type stuff and all the rituals and things. I should have just gone to the cabin. And then he starts chanting.
Yes. Yeah. And then Art's chanting over him. Yeah.
I want to kill everyone. Satan is good. Satan is our pal.
And then we see him flicking through some channels. So the first one I didn't recognize.
The first one I didn't recognize. I recognize the other two.
It's someone being burnt at the stake.
Yeah.
Then we had The Exorcist, followed by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. Which I love the idea that all that's on are these horror films.
Yeah.
Like Satanic Panic doubled down in terms of marketing on the TV.
A bit of nightmare fuel for him because we get the dream sequence immediately after this. I love this dream sequence. Like, I'm a big fan of incorporating absurdity, especially horror comedy. Absurdity works so well.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of something where it's like you don't know it's a dream sequence and then they wake up. But when it's this bizarre and you obviously know that it's some sort of weird dreamscape from the get-go.
I sometimes also, when it's done well, don't mind it when like we are led to believe that it's a continuation of the standard narrative. Then we find out it's a dream sequence. Sometimes that's done poorly. Sometimes it's done well. But for this particular one where we know it is, it's a way of bringing in some levity into the story and like breaking it up a little bit and getting into the psyche of the character as well.
But the choice of imagery too is awesome.
Yes.
Like the chainsaw that cuts him out of the family photo,
Yeah.
the barbecue because he talked about fixing the barbecue earlier. And
Yep.
like what a cool set piece to have
Yep.
a giant barbecue that they can have him on.
Yeah.
Even the floating staircase with Carrie Fisher just surrounded by like the fog. Mm-hmm. It's awesome. It's
Yeah,
really, really
yeah.
well done.
Yep.
And Art even comes in as Chip, the ice cream guy.
Yes.
It's not really Chip, it's me, it's Art. Again, a really hard cut from that creepy sequence to Mr. Rogers on the TV singing It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Which, like, not that they would have known at the time, but we know that Tom Hanks portrayed Mr. Rogers just in a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago. That's a great film as well. But yeah, like I thought that was a weird little tie-in there.
I mean, the song has like that irony of it being a beautiful day in the neighborhood, but also having something that was seen at the time as the epitome of innocence.
Yes.
After a satanic dream.
Yeah.
That contrast between
Yep.
the two
Yep.
just pans across to him looking so exhausted
Yeah.
in his relaxing weekend at
Yes.
home.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sequences, Carrie Fisher not letting him go out to play.
Yeah, this is the one, right?
So
Like
good.
the way it's
Please, Carol, can Ray come out?
And again, the use of camera to make the Rumsfeld and Art look so small
kids.
on the yeah.
So
And
good.
whereas Carol's like up top, like given the position of power and stuff like that, and the way that she speaks to them, like
It's like, no. I love, she even says, he can't come out until he resembles the man I married. Carol, we don't have that kind of time.
There's even like at the end of it, Art kind of kicks the dirt in frustration,
Yes.
and there's like a little Jerry Goldsmith sound effect in there. It's great. Yeah.
So because they're left to their own devices, Art and Rumsfeld decide to write a note saying they know what's going on and slip it under the Klopex door. And so Art goes out to Tom Hanks, who's trying to sunbake in the backyard. Oh, I'm only trying to take a nap. I'm only trying to get some goddamn sleep. When Art explains that he's stuck a note under the door, Tom Hanks freaks out.
Oh, shit! Stupid idiot! I can't believe you!
Because he has also left a note under the door and one of the Klopex saw him do it. So he assumes that they're going to think he's the one that left the note. And this was the part where when he grabs the cans and squeezes them, the 2 beer cans, and just throws them down and goes, oh, Jesus! Maddie's watching the movie on the couch next to me and she's like, this is so you.
All right.
Just when I get stressed out, I'm just like, ugh.
Oh, I can't believe you stupid! Why didn't you... God!
This is probably a good point to bring in. This film was put together during a writer's strike. So, the Writers Guild of America were on strike in '88, and Joe Dante and co. kind of rushed the film through in terms of production, like getting the script written and stuff. But because of the rush, they had to rely a lot on improvisation. So Dante would ask characters to ad-lib on set to just get a bit more to work with. I have a feeling that Tom Hanks, there's this particular scene they reference later on where he did it, but like scenes like that would have been Tom Hanks leaning into it as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
That makes me appreciate it all the more.
Yeah. So a lot of the time, the characters just kind of went with it in terms of what the scene needed. With that framing of the film, I really can appreciate it stronger as well. Yeah.
So as they're talking, Art is throwing the bone for Ray's dog, and then he looks at it and realizes it's a human thigh bone.
Ray, this is Walter.
And they do the crash zoom in and out as they scream.
I mean, any director currently doing that would like default to being cringed at, but like the movie's tone already,
Oh, it's perfect.
it's so good. Like I was watching it going, wait, do I like this? I'm like, I like this.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But they're not trying to do it seriously.
No,
Obviously, it's
yeah.
a joke. Like, even the way they shake their heads as they scream no, it's so good.
Yeah.
But yes, then one of the Klopex throws the note back. And so Tom Hanks has a little bit of freak out knowing that they have pinpointed him as the one who's done it. And he goes to run inside and Carrie Fisher comes out and knocks him in the face. And this was the part where I mentioned to you earlier that I noticed a joke that they put in the film that I've never noticed before. He picks up 2 more beer cans and scrunches them in the exact same way that he did before and then throws them down.
Yeah.
And it's just so good. Like, he was nowhere near there drinking beer, but they've set up props just so that he can mimic that gag again of him grabbing something and throwing it down.
Speaking
So
of the
funny.
use of props, what I love is that once the rubbish has been taken out of the garbage truck, they keep the rubbish there on the street for the rest of the film. But any other film would have just like miraculously had that rubbish taken away with no explanation at all. Whereas this film decided to, no, we're going to keep it there, not just for continuity, but also for symbolism. I love it.
And it plays into everything that happens from this point in the film, creates more of a figurative and literal mess.
Yeah.
So everything that they do now has some sort of physical consequence that then remains.
Yep.
So Carol and Bonnie team up at this point and decide to be the voice of reason and say, let's just go to the house and introduce ourselves. We'll clear all of it up.
I love that Bonnie gets a bit of depth here because she's obviously been portrayed prior as just to be Rumsfeld's like
Accessory.
Yeah.
So once they go over there, we meet Hans and Ruben.
But not without them again falling
Through the holes.
Rumsfeld like makes 2 holes this time. Was it Rumsfeld on the first one?
No, Art on the first one and Rumsfeld on this
and
one.
loses
Drops the brownies.
Yeah, I love
Hope
it.
you got a sweet tooth, Sonny. Art obviously hasn't been invited, so he takes the opportunity to sneak into the Klopek's backyard.
I love that Carol says that Art can't come as well. Carol's view on Art is like an acceptance of his friendship with her husband, but doesn't really want him around the house that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was the sequence where, in terms of pacing, I noticed it was done so well. So it cuts back inside the house, and they use this absence of sound to really exemplify how awkward the situation is. But it's not boring. You're watching each of them. You can't hear anything, and then it finally cuts to Rumsfeld just peeling the wallpaper off.
Yep.
Because it's so quiet, he has to do something.
It's so funny that you bring this up. I also thought the absence of sound allowed for them to really lean into the awkwardness of Ray eating the sardine.
Oh my God,
And
his facial expression.
The
You should
noise
do it.
as he's taking it, like it's exaggerated noise, like the slipperiness,
So good.
grossness of him taking it from the tin. So well done.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And then they use that cliche of when there's nothing else to say, you got to talk about the weather.
Yes.
And he's like, oh, it's been real damp lately. And then Bonnie's like, oh, I can't do anything with my hair. You were asking me earlier, do they ever actually clarify where the Klopeks come from?
Yes, yeah.
Because Rumsfeld says, Klopek, is that Slavic? Ruben goes, no, really aggressively. Whoa, about a 9 on the tension scale there, Rubes. After this, we meet the doctor, Werner Klopek. So
Yes.
he's kind of like the head Klopek.
Yeah, he's Hans's father because the other one is introduced as his uncle.
Uncle,
Yep,
yes.
yep.
Even though Werner is a little weird and eccentric, nowhere near as much as the other two. And in a sense, makes things seem a little more normal within the house.
Yeah.
It's at the point that he's introduced that we get a justification for a lot of things. Like, oh, what was the noise in the basement? Oh, he was working down there. Oh, no, there's blood. Oh, it's just paint. He was just doing some painting. There's a lot of explanation. He's a lot more friendly. He's talking about normal things that neighbors might talk about. Oh, they're going to be moving away. They wish they got to know each other better. So you do start to think, okay, maybe they are normal. They're a little eccentric, but maybe they're just normal people. Again, right at the point where you're like, this is weird, then you get that levity from it.
Yep.
Ray accidentally lets the Klopek's dog out and the dog attacks Art. It shows how things are getting progressively more messy. This is when Art falls back on the fence, breaks some of the fence, the power kind of goes out a little
Yes,
bit.
yeah.
So it just shows the chaos and how they're making things worse and worse. If nothing is going on, then they're really just being horrible people to this family that lives next door.
Yeah.
After this visit, the team is still divided. Bonnie and Carol think that they're just a little eccentric. Art and Rumsfeld think, nope, something sinister is definitely going on. And momentarily, we think that finally Ray is siding with the girls.
Yeah, and like I almost to that point thought that maybe when Werner put the sugar substitute into the teas, maybe Ray had been drugged because he suddenly took on this really complicit role. But it was all a ruse.
Of course it was, yes.
Yeah.
We find out that he found Walter's toupee, which he had returned earlier to Walter's house, so he knows that the Klopeks had been back inside the house.
Yeah.
So they decide as a group that the three boys are going to sneak into the house while the Klopeks are out the following day. Nobody knocks off an old man in my neighborhood and gets away with it. Ray encourages Carol and his son to go out because they're going to be out playing so much golf.
Yeah.
Hey, Carol, see my new golf club here? I got it so I don't get blisters playing golf. We're going to be playing that much golf, really.
He's in the full golf outfit. I love that he didn't need to commit that much to the bit, but he goes above and beyond to try and show
In
that they're
his
gonna
mind,
be
he
playing.
needs to in order to be convincing, right? Yeah.
And so Ricky invites all of his friends over because he knows something good's going to go down that day. Art has to climb up to cut the power for the Klopeks fence, and he simultaneously ends up cutting the power for the entire block. But I love during this sequence how they're just watching him do it, and Rumsfeld goes, I'm not sure he knows what he's doing. And then Tom Hanks goes, well, why didn't you go? Well, it's very hard. It's like he's been portrayed as this military man who can take on anything.
Yeah,
but those little moments are just so nice. They all get their role to play. Rumsfeld goes up on his roof to kind of scout out when the Klopeks are going to return. And you can see how much joy he gets from talking to them on the walkie-talkie.
I wonder how much of the film, especially at this scene, do you reckon is influenced by the slapstick of old, like Three Stooges and stuff like that? It's really...
Oh, I'm sure a lot of it.
Yeah. Like the slapstick element, especially in this sequence, is really high.
Art and Ray, or mainly Ray, digs up the entire backyard. And Art's just kind of lazing around. Because it's so hot, they decide, you know what, maybe we'll start searching inside the house because we haven't found anything out here. And so Ray tries to use one of his cards to break into the house and just snaps it in the
card
door.
breaks immediately.
Art goes, it's a shit store anyway. Did you notice Dutch tilt when they go inside the house?
The Dutch tilts really come in once they have entered the house. I don't think I'd noticed any prior to them entering the house.
No, I made a note. They were very restrained. Considering how much they were doing with camera, they were restrained in the way that they used that sparingly up until this point.
Joe Dante loved them. If I recall back to Gremlins, he's using a lot of Dutch tilts then.
It's a good way for the Gremlins, because of their size, it's a good way to give them more power in the sequence as well.
Yeah.
So you shoot them from a low Dutch tilt and it makes them look really ominous in the sequence.
But when it's used purposefully like this, the Dutch tilt in general, to kind of add a level of eeriness, or how would you describe this scene?
The whole film has been leading up to something. It has to kind of take it a step further at this point to really emphasize we're getting into the climax of it, and whatever's going to happen, we're about to get some answers.
Certainly heightening the suspense as well,
For sure.
Yeah.
So they find the industrial strength furnace and they decide to start digging up the basement, assuming that they've burnt all their victims and buried the bones underneath. And I like if there's just a throwaway line, but I like the justification that they give that electrical stuff can be working down there, even though they've cut the power. They say everything down there is hooked up to batteries. It's just a little moment, but it means that they can justify things happening from that point onwards without us going, well, hang on, you cut the power to the block. How is this working?
Yeah.
It's a nice little moment. But this is when Ricky calls out to Rumsfeld and he falls off the roof.
Yes.
Oh, it's such a good fall.
Yeah.
Like he hits about 3 or 4 different tiers before he lands on the ground.
Yep.
And then shoots the gun off into the car. All the like surfer dudes, skater dudes next door are like, whoa, like they think it's so awesome.
It's also when Corey Feldman delivers that line that I reckon he got the casting role for Donatello in the Ninja Turtles movie 2 years later.
At that point or later when the truck crashes and he goes, pizza dude!
You just hear him off like it's a random sound in. Yeah, I just picked up on that as well. Yeah.
And so the Klopeks come home and they see that the basement light is on, so they leave again to go get the cops. Rumsfeld had one job, he screwed it up.
Yep.
Just when Ray and Art think that they've found Walter, he comes home. And this reveal is shockingly sinister considering what we're actually getting is good news. We find out Walter isn't dead.
Yes.
But it gives you a sick feeling in your stomach because you're going on the journey with the guys who have just broken into this house and you now realize they've done all of this in vain. You feel scared for that scenario.
Art's run out of the house saying, we've found Walter, we've found Walter. We were at a point where we had been validated as to their suspicions, only to, within seconds, have that reversed.
Yeah, and they use really haunting music at this point. They do a close-up of Art's face looking horrified to see that he's alive. He's excited when he thinks he's dead, but he's horrified to find out he's alive. Essentially what we find out later on is that Walter had some sort of health scares, something to do with his heart, and so he's been medically attended to for the last couple of days.
Yeah, there was 2 nurses helping him out of the car and all that stuff. Yep.
Yeah. The Klopeks end up coming back with the cops, but it's far too late at this point because Ray has hit the gas line. The whole house explodes, and Tom Hanks comes staggering out, half his face burnt to a crisp, in a daze, and it's so funny.
Yep.
The way that he shows that physical comedy is just, it's fantastic.
Yep.
Carol comes home to find Ray talking a little crazy. The cops start to give answers to all the sinister things that have happened, so that's when they explain what's happened with Walter. They explain the Klopeks were picking up his mail, so that's when they picked up the toupee with his magazines. And so we as an audience go, that's the end of it. We've gotten answers. It was in their head the whole time.
Yeah.
And you think, I mean, as a first-time watcher, you would think that's the end of it.
Yeah, so this is my big gripe. I guess we're getting to it right now, where art kind of tries to justify what has happened and like rationalize why they did what they did. And Ray then goes into this big yelly spiel.
Shut up, Art! Shut up! Remember what you were saying about people in the burbs, Art? People who mowed their lawn for the 800th time and then snap! Well, that's us! It's not them! That's us! We're the ones who are throwing garbage in the street and lighting fires! We're the ones who are acting suspicious and paranoid! We're the lunatics!
I didn't like this.
You don't like the spiel?
I don't like the spiel because what it is
okay.
something we've talked about where I don't feel like Dante trusted his audience to know this already. I knew this.
Okay.
Like, he decided to have this big rant just to make sure that the audience knew they were in the wrong, at least at that stage, right? I do like that it then reverses again later on.
See, I thought it was going to be the reverse part you didn't like, but the spiel, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, because I just like, I already felt this. I loved that that's what the film was about. I didn't need the explication from Tom Hanks on this one. So yeah.
See, that's really interesting because you know that personally I've had a lot of gripes with films when I felt like the director was treating its audience like an idiot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I didn't feel that from this spiel. I like almost the summary of it.
Yeah. I think the fact that you've brought it up on previous films has made me more aware, and this one really stood out for me.
When I was watching it, to me it wasn't explaining it to the audience. To me it was that self-recognition of what they'd done.
Yeah.
That's how I saw it.
Yeah, I just thought it could have been, like, I still felt that it was necessary to have the dialogue and the frustration, but I felt like it was overfeeding the point in the way it was scripted. It's a minor gripe. Like, you know, I still love the film.
Whether he summarized it too obvious or not, the metaphor of the people in the burbs that snap
Yes.
and these guys essentially acting crazy for the entire film is amazing.
Yep, like that
So
kind
good.
of claustrophobia that comes from being in the suburban setting and like thinking that the world needs you to do these things. And I love that commentary of like, people could just mind their own business. Yeah.
I do like at the end of his rant, I've been blown up, take me to the hospital, and throws the...
This is that all ad-lib. So this is the one... Yeah, so this really, like, and for me, when I read this, I'm like, oh, Tom Hanks, hello, you've gone up in the ranks for me. All that scene with the ambulance bed,
throws the stretcher in, like, take me to the hospital, and jumps in.
So good.
To have Carol come in afterwards, you okay? He's, I'm fine, Carol, with his face like buried into the stretcher.
Yeah.
I love this whole sequence. Did you recognize one of the cops? The older one? This is my obscure Seinfeld reference. So in the episode of Seinfeld where Newman and Kramer are trying to collect all the bottles for recycling, Newman ends up getting thrown out of the truck and goes to that ranch. He's the old farmer on the ranch.
There's only 2 rules you're going to stay over in my house.
We'll find out in the soundbite that I put in.
I just have one rule. Keep your hands off my daughter.
Dr. Klopeks ends up coming into the ambulance and we get Tom Hanks apologizing to him and like offering to help him rebuild his house and everything like that. And then one more final big reveal of the film, we find out that he has in fact killed someone. He killed Mr. Knapp, who was the previous owner of the house,
yeah.
which has come up multiple times before. They're like, oh, we don't remember the Naps leaving, or like they left really suddenly. We never saw a moving truck out the front of your house. There was a lot of circumstances around that, but because they've been so focused on Walter, we kind of forget about that plot point.
Now, to clarify, Ray never looked in the furnace and saw the skulls.
No.
Klopek just assumes it, right?
Yeah, he gives himself away.
Which kind of adds a bit of like irony to it all as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
So he attacks Ray as Hans tries to drive off. And it's so funny because like they're driving all over the road, but it cuts back to everyone watching. They don't look concerned at all.
Yeah.
Like Carol's just watching like, what's going on?
I love that. Like that's very slapstick as well when the bed comes out of the ambulance.
And that's got to be rear projection where they're on like
100%.
But it works so well in this sequence.
So
like, I love
much
it.
fun. Like I said, I love that the whole film is just set on the street or in the houses of the street. And then to have that occurring as well, like that action sequence, the trolley bed kind of going down the street.
And of course, out of all houses in the street to crash into, it's got to be Art's house.
Yes, yep. And then, so Hans is driving the ambulance and then he crashes the ambulance.
Not before crashing into the pizza dude.
Yes.
Pizza dude!
Yeah, and all the pizzas spill out the side. Like, there were a lot of pizzas in that van as well. But then my favourite is like Hans trying to escape and then Rumsfeld calling out,
Oh, this is the stunt.
not so fast, Pinocchio. Is
Yes.
Because Hans is like dressed up as like some kind of weird. It is kind
Yeah.
of Germany there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one where he says, not so fast, Pinocchio, and he slides into him, takes his legs out.
Do you think that's what he was supposed to do? Because part of it looks like he's just accidentally slipped over.
That's right. Either way, I adore it.
It's great. It's very good.
Because it feeds into the whole, he's not really a military force that knows he himself is kind of bumbling.
Yeah.
But he still kind of stops Hans running away. I thought that was very well done, that little bit.
Tom Hanks ends up performing a citizen's arrest on him.
Yep.
And everyone's still like questioning it, but then they uncover all of the bones in the trunk. And that's one of those things where it's like, they've gotten to a point where they need to wrap up the narrative.
Yes.
So they're just like, here's a convenient thing that everyone can find so that it's wrapped up with a little bow.
Yep.
There's no way they're driving around with that in the trunk of their car, considering how careful they've been about, they're onto us in the backyard, so we'll move it to somewhere else.
Yeah.
They're onto us in the garbage can, so we'll move it to somewhere else. Oh, we'll just leave it in the trunk while we get the cops.
Like you were talking about with pacing though, it would have been a bit tedious to like wait until the house was available for them to go down into the furnace.
Of course.
Of course. You know, as much as that is a silly way to wrap things up, it works with the film.
Tonally, it's perfect. Yeah. It all kind of wraps up pretty quickly. Ray and Carol decide that they will, in fact, go away to the cabin to get a bit of a break from it. And he asks Ricky to keep an eye on the neighborhood for him. And he says, "You betcha, Mr. Peterson." He's like, "God, I love this street."
The fourth wall break.
Yeah. And then they do the zoom out again, back to the Universal logo.
Yep.
Great way to end the film.
It really was. The pace of this film was probably what was best on show. Like, there's so many great things about it, but yeah, the momentum that it kept the audience with, like, I really felt it going into a film where I was like, oh, I can't remember whether I liked this. Even if I did like it at the time, am I going to like it now? And it just caught me and kept me because the story's fun and it just kept it flowing. Yeah, it was really well made film.
Yeah. Look, I adore it. So good pick, Mr. Brown.
Yes, well done. At the time, it wasn't a really big hit. Like, it was seen as just yet another film and considered, it did make its money back, but not big, fun blockbuster. But now it's got a cult following.
I was going to say, a bit of wordplay there, a cult following.
Yes, yeah.
I really love this film.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to weekly watches?
Yeah.
Weekly watches. Weekly watches.
This week, I've got 2 movies and 2 TV shows.
I have just movies, but quite a few of them. So I'm going to whittle it down to maybe my top 5 of the last week or so.
Yeah, and we're a little bit all over the shop. So we're a couple of weeks behind from screening time to recording time to our own personal watches. So the next couple of podcasts, it might be there's one week where we've got a lot, there's one week where there's not much. These are all watches that I did, say, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to have a bunch of films that I've watched recently that I can talk about.
Cool. My first one is a De Palma film. So after you'd done your Brian De Palma-rama, you inspired me to check out a De Palma film of my own, but I was watching it on ClickView, and the only one that was readily available that I hadn't seen before was a film called Dress to Kill with Michael Caine.
Oh, really? Michael Caine?
Yeah. Yeah, Michael Caine. And so I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, only because I know it's one of the Brian De Palmas that you haven't seen.
Yes.
And so, considering it's got a mystery element to it, I don't really want to give anything too much away, but I would say that the mystery itself felt a little bit predictable. I wouldn't say that that's what I really liked about it. I liked the elements of suspense. De Palma's always been very good at tension within his film and that idea of paranoia. And I think that there's some really great sequence where, again, things are quite drawn out, but it doesn't feel drawn out. He always maintains that element of suspense and tension. It just, the pace feels good.
Were there Dutch tilts?
Oh, there were some Dutch tilts. Dutch tilts for days.
Were there long focus shots as well?
There were a couple of long focus shots.
He loves those two things. Yeah.
So I'd be very, very keen to talk to you about this one in a bit more depth when you've seen it, because, yeah, as I said, I don't want to accidentally say something that might give the plot away, but good elements of suspense. I did make a note to you that I thought the film should have ended, say, 20 minutes earlier than it did. You know those films that almost have a false ending and then like a little bit of an encore afterwards, or an entr'acte?
Yeah.
It didn't need it.
Yeah.
I think that there were good performances in it. It felt really eerie at times. And even though the mystery element was a little bit predictable, I think that had I watched this when it was first released, having not been exposed to familiar plots within other films, then it might have been a lot more shocking.
Yep.
So that was called Dress to Kill.
Very good. First one for me is Yorgos Lanthimos' The Lobster. This is a rewatch for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've definitely seen that.
Yeah, well, I've seen all of his films. I'm continuing on my lead up to his new film coming out. Now it's going to get released on Boxing Day.
You wouldn't be foolish enough to go see it on Boxing Day.
I'm that excited that as soon as I can see it, but like we'll see how it all goes. Poor Things is the film we're referring to, is set for release on Boxing Day, and
Rami Malek?
Rami Malek is in it, Emma Stone, and Willem Dafoe. Looks to be exceptional. Very excited for it. So this is going to be his 6th feature-length film.
Cool.
But preceding that was The Lobster, Killing of Sacred Deer.
I've seen Killing of Sacred Deer, haven't seen The Lobster.
And The Favourite, which is one of the best films of the last 10 years.
One of your favourites.
Yeah, it is one of my favourites. Rewatching The Lobster really put it up for me as well. Like, I enjoyed it a lot more in this rewatch. So it's Colin Farrell, who I just think, whatever he's in, he just smashes it. But it's also got Olivia Colman, Rachel Weisz in it. Like the cast is really strong. But what I loved about it was it's analogous of the pressure we feel when we want to be single, or the pressure we feel when we want to be in a relationship. And so it's not saying one's better than the other. It's just talking about the societal pressures that come from choosing one of them. And then people are like saying, oh no, you should be this or you should be that.
Right.
And the way it's presented, I just love it. So yeah,
it's an absurdist film, right?
Absolutely, it's an absurdist film.
It's one that I've been meaning to watch for a very long time, and it just keeps sort of slipping my mind.
Basically, it's some kind of weird alternate universe where people who are single go to this hotel and they have 45 days to partner up with someone else, or they turn into an animal of their choosing. So I won't say too much more, but yeah, I love The Lobster. I reckon it's a great film.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Next on my list, Happily, and ironically, I did not leave feeling happy because it was a bit of a downer, this one. It actually has a lot of people who I should be able to rattle off, but unfortunately the only one that comes to mind is Joel McHale. But essentially the plot of Happily is that this married couple has a lot of resentment from their friendship group because the magic in their relationship hasn't seemed to dissipate. So they've still going through that honeymoon phase, despite the fact that they've been together for years and years. And so there's an implication early on in the film that something has gone wrong and that everybody should exit that honeymoon phase and something is wrong with their genetic makeup.
Right.
And that it needs to be removed. And so there's this kind of sci-fi element behind that. And they end up going away for the weekend with those couples that all resent them, and someone turns up that tries to take away that element of their personality. And so it was engaging at first. The comedy in it was pretty good. It wasn't laugh out loud kind of comedy. It was the type of satire that goes with social commentary. It was enjoyable enough as a watch, but I felt like I wasn't satisfied at the end of it because it didn't provide any answers, and it didn't do so in a clever way. So sometimes you can say, oh, you don't need to have answers to this in order to be able to appreciate what the film is showing. But to me, when I got to the end of it and it didn't give me any answers, I was like, well, that's lazy.
Yeah, right.
So perhaps there are other people who are watching it and that's not the impression they get, and they think, oh, it's great that they didn't give answers. But for me, I was really looking for some sort of an explanation to the sci-fi elements behind it. And so even if you're using it as a metaphor for something, you want enough explanation that the metaphor makes sense. And I'm not sure I got that either. So great performances in the film, comedic actors that play off each other really, really well for those elements of satire. But yeah, I didn't get enough from the plot or the symbolism of the film.
The next one for me was an old Australian film by the director of one of our favourites and one that we've visited in Film Club, Peter Weir, who directed Truman Show.
Yes.
But it also is well-known Australian director for Picnic at Hanging Rock, Gallipoli, like he's one of our most revered directors. But this film was one that he did in 1979, which was actually co-commissioned by Channel 9 and a few other screen production companies. It was meant to be a made-for-TV film. So it only had a running time of 77 minutes.
Oh, you loved that.
Let's scrap a tight 90. We're going in for a tight 77. I was wrapped. The film itself was mediocre. Like, it was a TV movie. Like, it's called The Plumber, by the way. I should have mentioned what the title is.
Wow.
Yeah. It's called The Plumber. Coincidentally, it's about a plumber who...
I don't think that's a coincidence.
visits this apartment building of this couple who are staying on campus at a university, seemingly because he tells them that he needs to come in and fix something that he's been told to do servicing on. But he manipulates his way into their household and keeps returning, saying he needs to come back for the whole week, and then, slowly absolutely ruins their bathroom. And it's about invasion almost.
Has this ever happened to you? When the guys show up, they immediately ask if they can use your bathroom, and you hear a bunch of scrounging around, and then you hear a bunch of yelling, and one of them is standing in the bathroom doorway shouting at you, and his friend's foot stuck in the toilet, and he says, help him! You gotta help him! And when you go in there to help him, he just pulls it out easily and laughs because his foot wasn't stuck. It wasn't stuck at all, he was just faking it.
It was okay. It was fine. Like, I was glad I watched it.
Sounds like we've had a week of watching like metaphor films.
Yes, absolutely. The next one is very strong on the metaphor. I appreciated it, especially as a piece of Australian cinema history that I got to participate in. But yeah, it was so in terms of actual enjoyment.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So I've got 2 TV shows as well. The first one is Big Mouth. Now, I don't know that we've ever spoken about Big Mouth on the podcast. When it first came out, I adored Big Mouth. I thought it was really, really funny. And then I haven't watched it in a very long time. The novelty of it wore off for me.
Exactly the same for me.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, essentially, it's a Nick Kroll show. I don't know the other writer on it, but I believe the 2 main characters are based off Nick Kroll and this other writer. And so the 2 leading voice actors are Nick Kroll and John Mulaney. Yep. They have a lot of SNL types within it popping up for random cameos. A couple of characters that are consistently through it. But essentially what it is a way for Nick Kroll to vent a lot of the things that he didn't necessarily understand that he was going through when he went through puberty in high school.
Prepubescent and pubescent kind of challenges.
Yeah, exactly right. And so it was kind of fun watching adults target things tailored at kids in a very adult comedy. Like, who is this aimed at when you first watch it? Like, it's pretty funny. And so after a while, I kind of got to a point where I was like, I'm a bit sick of this.
I get the joke.
Yeah. And so I hadn't watched it in a very, very long time. And then it was one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. And it was just an easy watch, like a really good one to have on in the background. And because I hadn't watched it for a while, the novelty of it had returned. And it was fun to go back to. And so I'm up to date with that now. And it was also really interesting to watch the show evolve, because obviously it started off as a way for Nick Kroll to address some of the things that he's been through. But as the show goes on, he starts to address things that other characters are going through. And he actually, even though the show starts as a form of things that were going on in his childhood, he's starting to address things that are a lot more current in today's world with kids these days. And so it's a really unique transition from what was quite a basic look at puberty into a really complex look at all of the different areas that people experience and the troubles and trauma that people go through.
And he moves out of that very male focus from this first season into a raft of different gender vision on pubescent challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
And he never shied away in the earlier season of showing embarrassing scenarios that his character that's based on him has gone through. But he also shows really negative depictions of how men can treat women throughout the show as well, which are realistic depictions. And they give explanations as to why people go through the different scenarios that they're in. But I like that they show all of the good and the bad, and some things they justify, other things they just go, people are horrible people. And it's a really, really interesting look, especially as teachers of what kids are going through.
Nothing beats Jason Mantzoukas' character, though.
It is wildly inappropriate at times, but it's also super informative at times as well.
Yeah, really. And that's what I love about these shows, where like the inappropriate label, actually when you dig a bit deeper and go, well, hang on a second. He's had these thoughts as a writer. He's not the only person that's had these thoughts as a writer. Maybe you don't agree or align with everything that's represented on the show, but I bet you there's something in there for everyone.
Well, and it's also a really interesting discussion about, has there been things that we should be talking about in society that we're not because we assume it to be inappropriate?
Yeah, we label things taboo when it's, anyway. I always respected the show for that nature. Maybe I'll go back and, like, how many seasons?
I think 7 now.
Oof, wow, I was going to guess at 5. Yeah.
I ducked out about season 2 or 3.
Me as well. Yeah.
Obviously, now have done a big binge watch of the rest. So.
Nice. More films for me. Another revisit. This one was a lock for me. I actually went to it as a comfort film. Like, sometimes you just want to go to a film you know you're going to love.
Yes.
And one that is like a guarantee. Anyway, usually it's a Coen Brothers film for me. I could probably pick from like 5 different Coen Brothers films to do this. I chose A Serious Man. Now, have you seen A Serious Man?
I haven't, no. And I'm surprised that that's the comfort film that you went to.
Well, it's a surprise as well for anyone who knows the film, because it is far from comfortable a story. Based on like a 60s Jewish family who are just like they go through all this turmoil. The father is the protagonist, but you see the whole family kind of experiences different things. Probably in my top 3 films from them, and certainly in my top 20 films of all time. I adore this film, and I don't want to say too much. Like, it's all about the characters and the delivery and the story. And, like, it's hard to say a lot without making it sound lesser than what it is. Like, it's an experience to watch this film. So, A Serious Man, 2009, Coen Brothers, watch it.
Last one for me, another TV show, Rick and Morty. So I watched the latest season of Rick and Morty. I don't know if you know much about the fact that there's been a change in voice cast.
I didn't know that they went as far as voice cast. I know there was turbulence around one of the creators.
So Justin Roiland is one of the creators, but he's also the voice of both Rick and Morty.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So he's been exited from the show, and they ended up getting, I think, 2 separate people, one each for Rick and Morty. And it didn't take away from the show for me at all. You can notice, but I feel like it's not super noticeable, and I feel like you settle into the new voices very quickly.
I wonder if they've also got a little bit of an AI kind of like fixer upper over the top. You would
possibly
technology these days, if it's just enhancing, probably could get it there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I think because the characters had such distinct voices, it was a lot easier for someone to come in and try and replicate them. It's like, all right, if you take a show like Family Guy, it would be a lot harder to replicate Brian, which is just Seth MacFarlane's actual voice, than it would be to replicate someone like Stewie.
Yep.
I didn't find it distracting. I'd be curious to hear what other people thought, though, because, I know there was a lot of controversy around it. People didn't respond well once the trailer came out, because they were like, it's super noticeable. But, I found the show enjoyable. It's kind of doing, I think, weekly releases, so I haven't watched the whole season yet, but the first few episodes that I watched, really enjoyable.
Rick and Morty is very similar to Big Mouth, where I kind of bailed on it in season 3, maybe 4, because it's season 5 or 6 now.
7 maybe.
Well, there you go.
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, like I just found that monotony of what they were doing kind of really set in for me.
Again, the novelty does wear off. I think you need to take breaks from it. For sure.
Yeah. Especially for that show, it's very similar to Big Mouth though, where it's the rapid fire of the jokes and the way the writing and the delivery occurs, where it can be a bit grating after a while. It's not a show I can binge. So yeah, maybe that is one to return to as well for me.
Yeah, it's that self-aware comedy where it's like if you're going to be breaking the fourth wall all the time, that's going to wear off.
Yeah, it's also what my friend and teacher at our school, Miss Harkins, would call yelly cartoons, where like it's very loud cartoons where there's a lot of...
I love that term.
Yeah, I love it as well. She lumps Big Mouth, Rick and Morty, Close Enough, which I talked about on the last episode.
Close Enough is a yelly cartoon.
Yep. So, yeah, not for everyone. And for me, I have to take it in episodically, but my episode level,
not just watching episodes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm going to go with 2 more.
Yeah, go for it.
So I decided to be kind of all edgy and watch a Halloween movie after Halloween, the day after Halloween. And I watched Halloween.
Nice.
So I watched Halloween on November 1st. I had seen it before, but I couldn't remember it. Obviously, John Carpenter's not his first film, but his first big breakthrough film. And it goes down as iconic in terms of the slasher horrors and stuff like that. But for me, I didn't really actually think it was a great film. I think it's a very important film.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, just like what you were talking about with, what film were you referring to? Oh, Dress to Kill. Where at the time, when we weren't so kind of used to...
savvy to the tropes.
The tropes, that's right. You know, like maybe it would have been more enjoyable for me.
Because it established a lot of them.
Correct, right? And we talk about that with Night of the Living Dead for zombies and stuff like that. So totally can appreciate and respect how important a film it is. And there's certain things that I really like about it, particularly use of camera and music and stuff like that. But overall, didn't find it overly engaging as a film.
Yeah, it's interesting to look at that. If we look at something like Jurassic Park that established a lot of things, but then we also go, well, but what's come afterwards hasn't necessarily beaten what it's established.
Yes.
Whereas for Halloween, I think it's a perfect example of something where at the time it was doing a lot that hadn't been established, but a lot of things have been beaten about it since. So even the opening one-er, it's like, what a cool idea, but if you want to look for a one-take shot in a film, you're not going to Halloween for that.
Correct.
So, yeah, it's got a lot that at the time was incredibly unique and really established the genre, but I completely agree with you. I don't think it's aged.
I was interested to see what your thoughts were on my take on it, because, yeah, I know that horror fans revere it, and, yeah, I was just like, okay, I get it, but it's not one I'm going to go back to.
No, I appreciate what it's done, and I have returned to it multiple times, but I totally sympathize with what you're saying. Yeah.
And then the last one for me was the 2002 Steven Spielberg film, which I'd never seen before. Catch Me If You Can.
You'd never seen it.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, and rightly so, because after watching it, I'm like, oh, there's a reason why on Letterboxd this is in his top 10 films. Like,
wait, so what are you saying, rightly so?
Like, it's a good film.
Oh,
like,
I thought you were like, rightly so, I hadn't seen it.
No, rightly so, I should have seen it.
Okay,
because, like, it was just a blind spot for me. Like, I have seen many of his films, and I thought it was great. Like,
it really is.
I can recognize why I didn't go to it at the time, because its synopsis isn't a story that would normally appeal to me. Someone being manipulative and trying to, like, get away with something. Like, it's just not my kind of film. But the way it's told, our man Tom Hanks in it, Leo's at his prime in this, because he can play the 16-year-old son of Christopher Walken, who's also awesome in it. But then the age jump that he does throughout the film is really strong.
The 16-year-old's a little bit of a stretch. I love the haircut they give him.
It was believable enough for me. I was there with it.
There's certainly been worse examples of it.
Correct.
In the film.
Yeah. So yeah, and the story it told was just captivating, and the way it was told, and the pace. And I put Spielberg in with Scorsese, where they can be a bit pompous with what they want to do and a bit overindulgent with their story, and then it just kind of gets a bit boring.
Yeah.
But this one was a win.
I'm definitely putting in the main theme as well because it's such a cool tune.
I can't recall it.
Diddle-a-dun, diddle-a-dun.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep. So I had a big win with watching that one.
Good one to end on. That's, yeah.
Yep.
Love Catch Me If You Can. All right, let's move on to Tantalising Trailers.
Tantalizing trailers. Don't know if we will be a fan. How will it be? We'll know in time.
I've got 5 I want to touch on, but most of mine are pretty brief. Some I want to kind of go a little bit back and forth with you on. There's a new, I believe it's a reality show based on Squid Game. It's called Squid Game The Challenge.
Okay.
Have you seen an advertisement for this?
Not for this. I loved Squid Game.
Me too,
Okay.
but no thanks to this.
Okay.
Because it literally is the same games that we've already seen played in Squid Game with characters we're not going to care about.
Why would you say we're not going to care about it?
Because we're not going to get the character development in the same way that we do. They're not
Right.
going to establish the worlds that they've come from, the struggles of why they need money.
Fair enough.
You're like confident nod.
Yep.
But also, I think I'd be more engaged with it if they were basing it off Squid Game but changed the games. Because then at least we're seeing fresh things.
Yep.
I'm really excited to see a second season of Squid Game, but as a reality show, I don't think there's any appeal there for me.
Right.
But yeah, I was curious to get your opinion because I know you really enjoyed Squid Game as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a astute observation that what was a big appeal for Squid Game was the care factor you had around the character motivations. Like it's important to then, be invested with the characters and why they're doing what they're doing. So to have that kind of taken away and to then not have it at least compensated with, new games, I would imagine that it's going to be a bit duddish, but maybe not, but sounds it.
Plus, people aren't dying, so the stakes have never been lower.
Yeah. Trailer for me is a movie coming out early December called Leave the World Behind. This one came out of left field for me because I'm, usually when I see Julia Roberts' name next to something, I'm
Julia Roberts. Sorry.
What's that from?
It's from 22 Jump Street.
Okay, right.
Slam poetry, yelling, angry, waving my hands a lot. Cynthia, Jesus died for our Cynthias. Jesus cried, runaway bride. Julia Roberts, Julia Rob hurts. Cynthia, bop boop beep, bop bop boop bop. You're dead. That's for Cynthia. He's dead.
I think she's a fine actor, but I don't think she's not a draw card for me. But this one, Ethan Hawke's in it as well, and I'm pronouncing the name Mahershala Ali. Mahershala. Damn it. I'm getting closer every time.
You are.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I learnt the pronunciation for the podcast one week.
Yes.
It wasn't one I already knew.
Yeah. Mahershala Ali, Ethan Hawke, and Julia Roberts, they're playing some kind of... It's set pretty recent where AI is having a big impact on how the truth is being presented to people.
Oh, okay.
An Airbnb that they're staying in and stuff. It looks really cool, really kind of unique. We're seeing a lot of these movies coming out where they're using AI as a plot point, a plot device. I'm all for it if it's done well. I think it's got potential, and this one looks like it will. So that's Leave the World Behind.
Cool. Next up for me, they're making a second season of The Santa Clauses. And the reason I bring this up is because the movie, The Santa Claus with Tim Allen, I watched the first one and then the sequel films came out and I was like, no, thank you. And I only returned to watch the sequel films a couple of years ago. That wasn't enough to get me back in. But yeah, I only returned to watch them because I was watching a bunch of Christmas movies. Then when they made a first season of a TV show, there was something about the nostalgia of the first film. They brought back a lot of original characters. They brought back David Krumholtz's character,
Yep.
Bernard, from the first film. And I went, oh, I want to watch that because I want to see how they're kind of roping in the original characters with it. But it was just okay, right? Now that they're making a second season, they're repeating all the same mistakes of the sequel films where they're losing any of the good elements of it. Look, I'm not the target audience anymore, I don't think. I would hope not. But I think that they are still trying to draw people in through nostalgia, and I feel like these films become less and less magical, and the TV shows as well become less and less magical the more they make of it. So I just think the concept's too tired now.
And, like, this is a problem with, like, a lot of what we're getting from Hollywood is this, you know, beating the dead horse on intellectual property and, like, not taking...
Or a dead reindeer, if you will.
Not taking the risks of, like, developing new products. So, yeah, I can totally appreciate your reluctance on it. One that came out for me was a doco that is Michael Jackson's Thriller at 40.
Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't seen this.
Anyone who knows the Michael Jackson album Thriller, it was pivotal. Like, it changed the face of pop music when it came out. It looks like it's very much talking about the impact it had on music as a whole, which is what kind of captivates me more. Like, I like looking at trends and influences around the flow of popular music. So I love this album, and it's probably got my favourite Michael Jackson song on it, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I'm more interested in it telling the story around influence, and it's got a bunch of different interviews in there and stuff. So, yeah, it looks like fun. So that's Thriller at 40.
Yeah, cool. Next one for me, they're making another one of those spin-offs. This is one I might have mentioned earlier when I was talking about watching The Walking Dead. This one's called The Ones Who Live. And it is basically a Rick and Michonne spin-off from the original series. I do apologize to anyone who is watching the series because I am going to give a little spoiler here. In the last couple of seasons of the show, these two characters do not feature. They exit the show, but they don't die. And for a long period of time, you're not quite sure what's happened to them. And essentially, what this spin-off is the gap.
Why did you say Rick and Michonne?
Yes. So the
Right.
central character, yeah. And so this one does interest me. I ended up watching one of the other spin-offs, Dead City. I didn't mind that, but since these characters left the show, it went downhill for me. I felt their absence significantly, and I think that they're two characters that, to have their own spin-off, it would actually do quite well because they were so prominent in the original. And there were episodes that focused on them in the original series, and they were still strong episodes. You didn't need the other characters. So I think this could be quite good as a spin-off, and it certainly draws me in because you are somewhat interested to find out if they kind of make their way back to the original group, how it's going to kind of tie in.
Yeah.
Because the showrunners for The Walking Dead always intended to end it the way that they did, with a lot of loose ends, because they always wanted to do these separate stories about individual characters and spin-offs. So, yeah, I felt unfulfilled at the end of the show, which of course you're going to if they're leaving all of these loose ends.
Correct.
So I'm hoping that I feel I get a little more closure if I watch this season. But yeah, I'd be interested to know. So it's called The Ones Who Live.
Right. Looking across the table, my final one is also one that you've got. Fargo.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So a new season of Fargo is coming out. I loved the first two seasons of Fargo. Third one was okay. Fourth one was the Chris Rock one, which I watched one episode of and didn't get into.
So I loved the first one. I thought the second one was quite good. The third one I never finished because it just didn't grab me.
That was a
as
Ewan
much.
McGregor one.
The Ewan McGregor one,
I don't even think I finished it. Yeah, I think I'm the same. Yeah.
But I never even attempted the Chris Rock one.
Yeah, I watched half of the first episode. I'm like, I'm just not feeling it. Like, I'm like, maybe I'll come back to it later, but I never have. This one, in terms of the trailer, feels like it's got a bit going back to the film.
Yeah, a bit of a return to form.
Yeah. And John Hamm's a big draw card for me.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, love the Hamm.
For sure. When's that coming out?
Soon. I think
Like a December release?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Christmas Ham.
Yeah. I love that you had to like make sure. Like
come on, we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. I mean, we're coming into the American winter, so this is peak TV release time for America. So we are going to get a bunch of new shows coming out, and this is one that we're getting as well. I'm quite excited to see it.
Yeah, cool. Was that your last one?
That was my last one.
So I feel like you have seen this trailer though, Maestro.
I watched the teaser that they released about a month ago. I
Right.
haven't yet watched the full one that they've just dropped.
Look, I don't have much to say about it. It's a drama musical about Leonard Bernstein. It's not something that would usually grab me, but just watching the trailer, I was captivated by Bradley Cooper's performance.
Yes.
Just in the trailer.
Yep.
And so I think that alone is probably going to get me to go see this one.
I rate Bradley Cooper high, and he's directing this one as well.
Yeah.
I never saw the Barbra Streisand one that they redid with Lady Gaga.
Lady Gaga. We always talk about this.
We
I can see the cover.
something about voice or song or
Something about that.
yeah. He directed that as well, and he got like Academy Award noms for it. Like he's seen as someone who knows what he's doing. Like you're racking your brain right now.
You've killed me with this.
The trailer the teaser that I saw looked really strong. And again, it's historical element around music. Like Leonard Bernstein has done a bunch of really important film scores. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd be keen to see it.
Yeah. So that was my final one called Maestro. With that, guys, I will, as always, remind you to like, subscribe, share it around. Please comment telling us what that movie's called, because I will not rest until I know, and I refuse to look it up.
Yep, fair enough too. A Star is Born!
Ah, nice! Oh, thank goodness. Oh my God, finally I'll be able to sleep tonight then. But yes, we do have to get going, but while we're gone, Ricky, can you keep an eye on the neighborhood for us?
You betcha, Mr. Peterson. No problem.
Thanks very much, guys.
Bye!